TFM.
Hi, this is Michael Dorn, Lieutenant Commander Worf from Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, and you're listening to Trek FM.
Welcome to the Ready Room, show number 235, Big Swings. I'm Christopher Jones, and with me today is Larry Nemecek. We'll be looking back at Season 3 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, the hits, the misses, how the writer's strike impacted the stories, and more. So let's step into the Ready Room. Well, Larry, it has been 47 years since I entered this room, and unbelievably, you're still sleeping there on the sofa. What's going on?
Wow. This cushion is still just as lumpy as it was 3 years ago. When was the last time I broke in here and we did this?
I think it has actually been about 3 years, which is unbelievable because to me, as we were saying on the other side of the room, it feels like it's been maybe a year or so because I live in a time warp. But yeah, it has been several years, yeah.
Chris, I live in the real world and I live in a time warp. Did you know? No, wait. Did you hear about this pandemic thing? Oh, wait. I guess we were past it.
Oh, that, yeah.
Did that happen? And then these labor strikes, the writers and actors are on strike. And no, I guess that. Oh, did you know that I moved? This is the first time. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just coming out of the days from my Rigelian flu vaccination. So yeah, things are.
I'm just coming out of the haze known as 2025. But
there is one. Well,
it's good to see you and listen, hear you, man. It's been far too long. Seriously.
Well, thank you. Same. Great to see you again and chat about Star Trek. And speaking of haze, we've also just come out of the haze of Season 3 of Strange New Worlds, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Talk about a haze. Yeah.
It was an interesting one, that's for sure. So I thought that since...
Interesting sounds like the adjective you use when one of your good friends has you come see their play or see them in something and you have to say, oh, that was interesting. Yeah.
That was interesting. Well, I mean, watching Strange New World Season 3, I felt like I went to several of those plays, I have to say. And some of them were good and some of them were not as good.
And some of them were just interesting.
Interesting, for sure. So why don't we just kick it off with, how about an initial thought, and then we can talk about each episode briefly, and then kind of do an overall look back on what all that creative energy that came out of the studio means, not only for the show, but for the franchise and maybe where we're headed for the final 2 seasons of Strange New World.
Well, my thing with modern Trek, I mean, people have a lot of things they want to talk about, modern Trek or the Christmas era or the Secret Hideout. But one of the things, even beyond who's doing it, is just the fact that the landscape we live in now with the media, and since the beginning of Discovery, big streaming and cinematic TV and peak TV, and everybody, you threw money at everything to keep the churn down and to keep everybody on your channel. And we have gone to the North Pole and back with that concept to the point that where now everybody is, there's bundling, there's merging, the corporate side. Now I feel like I talk about the corporate end of business like I need an MBA when I just want to talk about Star Trek the last couple of years, which enters into the end of this season anyway. But this whole thing about this last season of Strange New is just the latest edition of everybody getting used to what streaming looks like and how it affects the show and the production and the create. What serialized storytelling, we went all over the place with Discovery and even Picard, and how Strange New was a swing back toward, less serial. But all of these things, but the biggest thing to me is just the friggin' schedule. In the old days, kids, you started filming unless you were a mid-season startup like DS9 and Voyager both were, not a fall, in September, but maybe you were January. But you started shooting in, May or June, and you shot your 26 episodes until March or so, and then everybody took 2 or 3 months off, and then, but the whole world was on that schedule.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing, we're sitting here trying to interpret Star Trek, and the reason I bring all that up is, yes, the pandemic, and yes, the strikes. But even before that, serial was just crazy because you don't know when in the year, it's totally arbitrary. And they write one year, they shoot it the next year, and then they let you see it a year later. And it just,
right.
There's no rhyme or reason to tracking. And you lose track of, like, you watch Cupid on TNG and you go, oh, that was the year there were 2 Robin Hood movies. I mean, you can, you can do that. And we're talking about this season. It's crazy to think that this season was written before the world saw season 2, just to keep this in mind. And I've talked about this season, and these are things that I think people need to keep in mind. They started writing this season as a response. They were so thrilled with season 2, right? The crossover show with Lower Decks, and then the musical, Subspace Rhapsody. But they internally knew that because they started planning, much less writing the season, before the world had reacted to season 2, much less those 2, big swings. I love the way they talk about these shows.
Yeah.
And then they sat down to start writing this season and bored it out. And halfway through, the strikes hit. So they had to put down their pens for like 6 months and come back late in the year and finish the season. And meanwhile, the world had seen season 2. People generally liked the crossover and the musical and thought they pulled them off. So if there was any chance about maybe changing tack on the season overall, there was no need to. So they were like full bore into what they had done and then started shooting, like early in 2024 for shows that we wouldn't see for another year. Yeah. So we had a 2-year cliffhanger wait. Like, forget your festival.
Gap was absolutely
all of those, all
insane.
Those facts, all of that stuff played into what they did and how we're reacting to it. And it's just crazy. Don't you think?
Yeah. Like with the best of both worlds, we waited all summer.
Which felt like an eternity.
But we remembered exactly what happened, and we're talking about what might be the outcome of this. And then we were eager when the conclusion aired because we still remember everything that happened, and we've just been waiting and waiting all summer. In the case of Hegemony, we don't even remember what happened. You have to go back and rewatch the previous episode and then also rely on the previously on recap at the beginning just to even know what the story is that you're trying to resolve. And you don't care what happens because you're not invested in it anymore after 2 years.
Well, it's, again, part of this whole formula is these 10 episode seasons. And I know the 26 episodes killed people. I mean, it's a different time, a different business model and all that.
Yeah.
But still, you get down to we may actually talk about the specifics of the season, but these big arcing things are just hanging over Star Trek and media in general. But yes, 26 eps a year killed people, I think. I literally did a couple of times, but the exhaustion factor. Yeah. But how about 18?
Yeah.
What about something in the middle? Who came up with these rules? Because we don't have time to get invested in, and about the time things do start to settle in, then it's yanked away, like you said.
Well, what's interesting is that now there are some Netflix series that are 8 episodes. I think actually quite a few that are 8 episodes. But when Discovery started, we had 15, and then it was cut back to 14, I think, and then it was cut back to 13. Like it kept becoming one less.
Actually, it was going to be 14 the first season, and they added
one. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and then the second season was the 14 plan, and then third season they cut to 13. Right.
Right. Exactly. But now, like across the board with most shows, Apple TV shows, these Paramount Plus shows, and all, everyone's kind of settled on 10 episodes. And I suppose there must be some budgetary reason for it. It's like, okay, we'll do 10. But I'm sure you saw maybe a month or so ago, Brandon Braga said that doing 10 episodes per season for these shows, it's like the Tinder of television. Like there's no substance to it. You can't really tell these stories. And that's what I feel like here. And I actually, because you brought up the writer's strike, I wanted to ask you, because you're there in the middle of that and you know how this stuff works. I had read something where Goldsman and Myers both said that, well, you know, the writer's strike happened, and then after that, there wasn't time to do rewrites. We know there are some things that weren't working quite as well, but we couldn't fix them. But it seems to me, as a creative myself, as a writer, that even if I'm not being paid, like it's my legacy, my name's on it, even if I weren't being paid, if I were allowed to do it and I saw something that just wasn't working, I would try to tweak my script and try to fix that before it was shot. Because one thing that plagues season 3 is that there are a lot of elements in the story that they try to pull together in the finale, but they don't pay off because they were never developed and they're just kind of hanging there. And I got the feeling like maybe they started out going in one direction and then they had to stop writing, and then they came back after this long break, and then maybe they had to just produce the stuff, and they realized some of these things didn't connect, but they didn't actually fix them. So is it really the case that they weren't able to fix them, or did they just decide not to?
I think they said. I think I've tried to glean onto what the process is, what they have the writers and who makes the decisions. And I think whoever the showrunner is, and maybe and here we've got Akiva and Henry Myers are kind of 1 and 2, and then right underneath that is Davey Perez and Bill Wolkoff. So,
and that's Akiva Goldsman. So when I say Goldsman, that's who I'm talking about.
Yeah. I'm sorry. And not that like Akiva and I have coffee every other day. I've just I've grown up, and a lot of people I've met, him less so than say some of the others, but I'm bad about first names. But my point is, basically they're the showrunners for a reason. It's their call on the general flow, and either starting up a show or coming out of one season to another. It's like, okay, well, where's our head? And I remember, back in the old days talking to Michael Pillar or Jerry Taylor or Ira and saying, well, we got to the end of the year and here's what we decided we hadn't done this in a long time. We want to do more of that next year, or we're going to we decide the show needs this, so we're going to do this direction. And they do that too. It's just that they have a lot fewer slots, but they do come out of it with a general tone and a mood. And for some reason, this whole thing about Strange New being a swing away from the hardcore or the story. I mean, there's a difference. I think we're figuring out that these season-long arcs, well, there's a difference between a character arc, which the old shows always had character. Like Worf had a long-time character arc, and 7 of 9 had a long-time character arc, and, all of that.
Spot.
It wasn't about season by season, and Discovery comes along in the serialized era, and Picard, and we think about arcs, but it's really a story arc. And they talked about chapters in a book and not individual, and Strange New was going to be the reaction away from that, right? I think the series itself was going to be that. So then each year, so you have all the freedom to do shows along, but maybe you're carrying water for the different, characters, and maybe some big background event going on. So they come into season 3 thinking, and I think one of the motivations was they wanted to do something with the Gorn, and maybe and as it turned out, maybe they went, oh, we need to clean up these loose pieces, these loose ends, and find a way out of that. But also, I think this standalone business, I think it just grew. Like the old, what we said about the original series is, it could handle comedy, it could handle drama, you could have a melodrama, you could have a courtroom show, you could have an action, you can have horror. And then Next Generation kind of went there, and DS9 not so much, but Voyager tried to get back to that, and Enterprise too. So I think part of this was it started off with that, let's do different flavors of shows. Mm-hmm. And then it just kind of went on steroids, and they got so, like, it was a big swing to do those old scientists, the Lower Decks crossover. And it was a big swing to do the musical after years of talking about doing a Trek musical. And I think they, not even waiting on the fan or the critical reaction, but just the way they felt doing it. They're like, well, I can watch the dailies. I can see the edited show. You won't see it for a year, haha world, but we know how great it was. We accomplished it. And they even start to talk about, they leaked it out a little bit and let it out slip. And people were having heart attacks and, ulcers about, oh my God, what if they don't pull this off? They're like, they would almost be saying, relax world, you won't see it for a year, but trust us, it's going to be awesome. And it wasn't even like standard, promo pablum. It really felt like they just like, I wish I could show you right now. I wish I could show you right now.
Yeah.
So I just think all of the way season 3 evolved was just all those trends, just kind of like I don't want to say a runaway train, but they just were racing along that track. They were really, as they should be, they were really proud of what they'd done, and they were really proud of some of these, Ad Astra per Aspera was a courtroom show, and it came off really well. And some not so much, but there was never, out of 10, you hope you don't have a clinker. Like with the 26 episodes, you'd have like 2 or 3 a year, but you went, okay, fine. We're exhausted.
It's easier to let those slide when you,
because the clock is ticking and they got to have a show, and it was almost like the 7th inning stretch kind of a thing. They get to the third, so many years they would get to that point in the season and be exhausted, and they'd go do something crazy to recharge.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing, and you already hear them. I think without saying so, they already are saying, "Okay, world, we heard you." We heard you. Because I don't think what was part of the equation was the fact that, again, there's only 10. And if there were 26, and I think fans started to react and not know. And then the more it kept people talked, I think people got it that, if we had 26, these would be fine. But you've only got 10 slots, and you're using 4 or 5 of them for wacky shows.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. And when we got to those old scientists, they hadn't really done that type of kind of really off the wall concept yet. And I think that because of Jack Quaid and Tawny Newsome, and especially Jack Quaid and how they pulled off the real life counterparts of their animated characters, made that really work. And the story itself was interesting, because going into that, I thought, how on earth are they going to do this? But it worked really well. And then the musical episode, I also was a little bit worried because of the teasers, but the premise was really interesting and the performances were really good. And so it worked. And I actually have the vinyl soundtrack now from that episode because I really enjoyed the episode.
It was a huge hit. There were sing-alongs everywhere, all over. Even during the strike, it was like, well, I can do this guilt-free. It's like people on the shows felt like they could do that and not be guilty. So sure, sing along, and we'll celebrate with you that way when we couldn't otherwise.
So I think those two worked for a couple of reasons. Like I said, I think the performances were really good and the concepts were really good, and they hadn't done that kind of thing yet. And so people were more receptive to it. But I think the other thing that maybe created the feeling that a lot of us had about the episodes that we got in season 3, like the Trelane episode and the holodeck episode, and then the 4.5 Vulcans, this kind of stuff, is that the really, really long gap between the seasons, people were so eager for the show to come back. And, at its core, what makes Star Trek work is that it's social commentary. Like, there's meaning to the stories. And even if you go back to the those TOS episodes that may have been a little bit silly, there was still something there. There was still like, what would the world be like if the society was based entirely on Chicago mobs, right? There was something there. It wasn't just being silly, right? And here, I feel like viewers, they were very eager for the show to come back, and they really wanted to have those kinds of episodes that we got in season 1 and the first half of season 2, which were really good. They were at their core, they were really good Star Trek episodes, and they were the kind of episodes that a lot of viewers felt like we didn't get with Discovery and had been wanting ever since the end of Enterprise. And so after that long gap, when the second episode in is like a really silly wedding episode, and then the next episode feels like, okay, they remembered what they're doing, and then the next episode is a holodeck episode making fun of William Shatner and Gene Roddenberry, people felt like, well, what's going on? We've only got 10 episodes, and we're almost at the middle of the season now, and this is all we've gotten. So I think that lag also added to the feeling of, like, it's fine to have these fun, silly episodes if you have 20, 22, 26 episodes. But when it's like 30%, at this point, after 4 episodes, it's 50% of the season so far is silliness. Yeah. Then, you're going to get a reaction from viewers asking sort of like, what's going on with the series?
And you can critique everything. I mean, you can critically critique. I mean, like a reviewer would critique. Nothing was perfect. Mm-hmm. So, but it's taking a step back. You can get into the moment. There were some wonderful moments in all the silly shows or all the wacky, the offbeat shows. But I look back at DS9. I may have told you this years ago. I feel guilty because the first episodes, I tend to, after the finale and the pilot, the DS9s, I tend to think, and thank God for In the Pale Moonlight. But aside from In the Pale Moonlight, all the hyper DS9 favorites that trip off my tongue, and some of that's because they were streaming in the streaming years, or the serialized years, I should say, run together a little bit. But I think of like Our Man Bashir and Little Green Men and Trials and Tribulations, and I think of the one-off wacky episodes, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm feeling guilty. I should go back and think of the gritty landmark shows that were like really meant something, that were the not just the one-off ones that they earned. Yeah. You mean that like they got to do one or two a year? No, I would never mention Profit and Lace in that breath.
Yeah,
but I mean, I remember feeling guilty that I should think of something first besides those, the really offbeat ones, and not the one, but the other one, in the 50s, Benny Russell in the 50s.
Oh, Far Beyond the Stars, yeah.
Yeah, Far Beyond the Stars. I don't have to think of these. Far Beyond the Stars is very serious and has a message, but it's still very off. It's, it's not a pattern show. So
she's got a worm in her belly.
She got a worm in her belly. Anyway, but that was, though, you could have maybe a couple of those a year, and everybody could get excited, but they would put the Mirror Universe shows in the same vein, right? They was like, it's a change of pace, creative,
like one per season. Crew. And not every season has one, but
not every one had it.
No seasons have 2 in DS9, I believe. It's only 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, that, as far as the whole, it's great because the crew gets to refresh, and the cast and the designers and everybody gets a little change of pace, and we, get to shake. Yeah. That explanation for their side of doing a not traditional format, as opposed to the audience enjoying it, hopefully, as a change of pace. But their thing, you'd have 2 or 3 of those a year on a show that like actually got in and did it. But to do 3 out of 26 is nothing. And it just feels like the world, by the time that that Strange New here did 2 or 3 of these, I think the fandom went from like, wait, why do I feel so weird, to, because they felt there were moments in all of these offbeat show episodes that were wonderful and great and brilliant.
Oh, yeah. No, there were great moments.
But it's like ODing on birthday cake or something, or on icing,
or
wedding
cake Fort
Yeah.
Trelane. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, I can certainly see from the creator standpoint and the actor standpoint, and you've even heard the cast of Strange New Worlds say this, particularly about the holodeck episode, that it's fun to be able to do something really different. You know, the Elysian Kingdom in season 1,
Right,
for example, of course, Subspace Rhapsody in season 2, and A Space Adventure Hour in season 3 are no doubt great fun for the actors. But for the viewers, I think when you go back, you're talking about the DS9 ones, for example. Even for viewers, it's kind of fun when you've got one of those in a season because it's something different. It's kind of a break from things, right? But it's easy to understand. And they also didn't help themselves in season 3 when the chatter was building in fandom about why are we doing so many of these silly episodes, and then you get the reveal that they're going to have puppets next season. Right. That did not help their cause at all.
Bad timing. But did you notice that as the season wore down, and here's the thing, nothing got really vicious. To the point like the early years of Discovery, when it was like, oh, you've got 2 women of color launching a show, you know, and Star Trek got back on the radar scope of the trolls. I always think of the Doomsday Machine, you know, it got back into the pre-programmed attack sphere. And I don't mean vicious and ugly and the toxic tubers and all that. I mean legitimate people critiquing season 3 and saying, hey, there are parts of all these episodes I like, but why? It's so precious. It's like some people looked at Manny Koto, the last year of Enterprise, not me, but some people said, and they had 20 to start with, and 2 of those went to the wrap up of the Nazi aliens, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
And people, this never occurred to me because I thought Manny was doing what I thought the stupid series would be all along. So no need to apologize, but some people people were saying, why is every episode you do a direct tie into the original series? And his basic answer was, because I only had 18 slots.
Right.
And I knew we were probably going to be it for a while. Like they did their best to bump the ratings up, but it wasn't going to work. And he was feeling this, I've got the keys finally to Star Trek as a longtime fan, but I've only got 18 hours and I know we're not going to be back again. We may dream and plan, but in all probability, we're not coming back. So what am I going to do with the last 18 hours of Star Trek it might be 20 years before there's episodic Star Trek again. What are we going to do? And so everything he's doing, to my doing all the things that should have been done to lead into the original series, which is what I thought Enterprise was supposed to do from 100 years.
Yeah.
So that whole thing about, well, I've only got this many slots, so here's what I'm going to do with them. And you update that to having 10 slots. And it's like, guys, these are fun shows, but you've only got 10 slots. And I know they were going to have another year probably. Well, now it turns out they've got 16 more slots after this. So now the middle season half of it has been fun, frothy stuff. And I wouldn't tell the actors and the writers not to go have fun with their work. But
it's interesting. It's an interesting point about now they have 16 more slots, because actually when you watch the finale of season 3, New Life and New Civilizations, the ending of the episode, it does feel as you're watching it like it could be the wrap up. And then afterwards, they did say that, they wrote it so that it could serve as a series finale if they didn't get renewed, because at the time they weren't sure. And so it'll be interesting to see where they go now, because a lot of the stuff at the end does feel a little bit rushed, like they got to wrap it up. And the final scenes especially feel like, it almost feels like a send-off. So
it's strange. If we're going to talk about the episodes we did, because I know one of the writers who I got to be fairly close with and shared some things with me. Not that this was a huge spoiler, but we're going to talk about the impact the strike had on the writing of this season, and what you were saying a minute ago. Like, I know exactly what script was basically written when the first strike happened. So this question about how much had been committed to and what could have been changed back and forth. Basically, episode 6,
which is the Sehlat who ate its tail.
Yes. they were in the middle of working on that one, writing wise, not filming, but writing wise, because they basically got the writing done by the end of the year and then started filming in January. And I think the point with almost all the streamers is maybe the last episode or two of these 10 episode seasons, but they try to have most of the season under wraps on paper. They try to have it all done before they start rolling a camera on this, because they're so interwoven and they're so tight in some of the continuity effects, later episodes. They don't want to have any crazy surprises or unforced errors. And but they were basically all written by the time they started filming in January, I think. But the strike divide happened in episode 6. Now they were able to go back and they felt the need to go back and do some polishing a little bit on the first 5. But there's basically your drop the needle.
Okay. So the strike happened before the Sehlat ate its tail.
Yes.
Okay. It's kind of right in the middle of that. All right.
In the middle of it. Yeah. That was they're always working on they plan the season and then they go along, and a lot of the writers are working. If you're a we used to have third party writers, right? Freelancers. Yeah. But now, since there's if you see an odd bird name as the writer, it's probably just somebody's assistant who's trying to. There's very few people from outside the staff working. So people have 2 scripts a year. So there is a time demand here where people can only do 1 script at a time. And even if they've got 8 or 10 writers on staff, and you've got and a lot of these had dual writing credits. So people were, younger writers were working with a more experienced writer, and they were, trying to do that. Yeah. Anyway.
And if you see a third writer, it could just be the DoorDash guy who they asked for a little bit of advice. When they
especially after the strike, apparently.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's go through the 10 slots that they had and just let me get a few of your thoughts. So Hegemony Part 2 is the resolution to the cliffhanger that started 2 years earlier, and we all forgot about what was going on. And this one to me was, I'll say it was a letdown, not that I was highly anticipating the resolution after 2 years, but what disappointed me about this episode was that they basically retold The Best of Both Worlds Part 2 all the way down to the resolution of putting the Gorn to sleep. So I did feel a little bit happy, like, oh good, they put the Gorn to sleep. They finally realized that this whole Gorn thing doesn't make any sense, and so they're going to find a way out of it. I thought. But anyway, what are your thoughts on this episode?
I enjoyed some of that, trying to flesh out what supposedly the Gorn are doing. I mean, I totally get it that all we know about the Gorn that we carry around with us is what we got out of one first season original series episode. It was supposed to be a mano, 1-to-1 thing.
They're really good at throwing big rocks slowly.
Yes,
that's
slowly.
What we know about them. Yes, I
know about the physical limitations. I've had this conversation with Davey Perez. I have a headcanon starting with the hyper hatchlings, right? That seem like we've had the joke for 60 years about the slow motion Gorn fights. So how does any of this hyper metabolized younglings, and then even like normal adults, like the null gravity fight, which was very cool.
Yeah.
But that was more of a but look, so I had a headcanon of they're just very competitive when they're young. It's whether it's the reality of modern life, it's bred into their species from prehistory, and the older they get, the more their metabolism settles until they're like any other humanoid as an adult. And that captain was very much stated to be the Gorn captain in Arena way back. Yeah. And that maybe that's an honored elder. I mean, I'm all up for this as much as I am like reevaluating Sarek and Spock and that family being crazy and Vulcans being wackadoodle more than we ever gave them credit, because we put Spock on a pedestal. And we love Vulcans because they didn't blow each other up like we did in the 60s. So I'm totally open with reevaluating all of that if it makes sense. And my headcanon was that the Gorn we saw was an elder and aged. And he may have a much more active, realistically moving, younger crew underneath him, right? Because he had a crew. So I'm just I'm wishing they would make a reference to a Gorn captain, which we haven't seen. We've just seen fighters and soldiers, and we've seen a fighter pilot later on. We get into the, So anyway, that's all a thing. So I'm welcome all that kind of stuff. It's just, I just wondered, there's a whole camera movement on La'an's face where she's like trying to concentrate after they cut themselves out of the sacks. And I thought, oh, is this La'an tapping into some kind of like augment power because they made such a big deal out of it. It was so different than any you'd seen before.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that sticks out to me this whole episode. And I was waiting for that to pay off, and it never did. And I'm like, oh, were you just like showing off a camera move? Well, damn, I wanted that to mean something, because I'm still waiting for La'an's augment or not. Do I just have the name? Do I have some augment power? Why the hell did they even create a character whose last name is Noonien Singh? Like, what is that going to be? We're 3 years in, and it's never been referenced, aside from her being a little ashamed about it. It's like, really?
Yeah.
That's going to be... I'm sorry, I'm on a tangent here.
Well, and it creates that question now of...
But that was like a tease to me that didn't fulfill. And I'm like, oh.
It creates that question now of, in the future, why Spock doesn't tell Khan, Kirk here, he almost dated your great-great-great-great-granddaughter.
Right. I mean, we're waiting... Well...
But no one remembers. So.
The audio drama Khan is great, and but they're all on SETI Alpha 5, and if
this
he has
is SETI Alpha 5,
it's got to be it's got to be a niece. She's got to be a grand niece or something. How could she be his direct lineage? I mean,
test
never
tubes.
say never.
They're test tubes. They're augments. So,
but is she really an augment, or does she like his whole was Khan Noonien Singh an only child? Was he natural? So if he was augmented, was that like the way Bashir was genetically altered after birth? Or was he out of the test, which I always thought he was out of the test tube that way.
I think he was out of the test tube because Bashir's situation was genetic modification to try to solve some sort of illness, right? Right. But that's not what the augments
So
were,
if we which is I kind of think what people thought. So if Khan is a test tube baby of a very special test tube batch, then did he have actual, like, what is the lineage, what does the family linear naming system even mean then?
Yeah, well, that, this is brought up actually in the previous season and tomorrow, where we actually see the facility where they're raising these kids. So, yeah.
But they don't clarify then what they just say it's my family, my predecessor.
Yeah, they don't clarify. Well, for her, they don't clarify it, right? For who the Noonien Singhs are in general, I think they don't clarify it, but the implication is that they are bred and they're all part of some project. So that would go along with the test tube. Okay, well, that's a lot of ideas. So.
I tend to. This is one thing ever since they announced her character and the name, I wanted to go, okay, well, yeah, test tube baby lineage, all bets are off. But if there's any kind of semblance to, we should move on. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Anyway, I was so disappointed that I thought we were going to finally get a moment of something here, and it.
Well, talking about that question about her being augmented or not and how it would affect her, you go back to the very pilot of the series itself when she's going to get the shot to transform, and then her reaction to not wanting to be sedated in any way and how it might affect her made you think that maybe there was something there going on. But yeah. Okay, well, that's Hegemony Part 2. Just kind of quick thoughts on that one.
But thumbs up on all the Gorn development, the Gorn destroyers, the Gorn ships, the fact that their control panel is tactile enough that Ortegas can figure out to lay down on it and she can fly it, which normally would be come on, Star Trek. But it's like, okay, it's alien interface. Let's just, it just worked. Yeah. And so, and yay for Ortegas to have that moment, although it sets up her season arc.
Right. So then we go into the next episode, which is Wedding Bell Blues, and we get a TOS callback with Trelane, although the producers have refused to say that it's for, well, actually they did later say that they did bring Trelane in, but in the aftermath of this episode, there were a lot of people online who were trying to say, well, they never call him Trelane. I'm like, he's obviously Trelane. Look at his hair. Look at his outfit. Look at what he says. He even says greetings and felicitations at one point, I believe. And Rhys Darby looks just like William Campbell in
You've got the mutton chops. I mean, you've got all of that going, yeah.
You know, obviously Trelane. I thought the Trelane part was quite fun. Well, Rhys Darby was amazing, I thought, as the character. He did a fantastic job with it. And I thought the whole episode was really a lot of fun. I would not have had John Delancey come in and voice Trelane's dad, which creates this whole question about the Q and Trelane now. But at this point in the season, not knowing where things were going to go on the silly scale, I really enjoyed this episode in the second slot.
I did. I was annoyed. I felt like I was in the days of J.J. Abrams not saying William Harrison was really Khan. Like that Khan, that C-O-N Khan. I felt like a little bit of this. If you're going to have him be Trelane and Q, now, not to spoil it, I get that. But now I'm watching the episode and you're dropping all these ominous crumbs. Is this part of that whole, we don't want to bore or make it so thick to new viewers who worry that they don't know all the little in-jokes, that they don't want to hang around or they don't want to take a risk to jump in? Because this was like 180. It's like, come on, say something. And I know greetings and felicitations. I know the jacket. I know the mutton chops. I know having John Delancey voice the dad. It's like all of that was... But still, we want to know, can it be on a graphic somewhere that we just see, you know?
Yeah.
And then to have the producer, if this is going to be, and this happened more than once this season, for them to all come out and go, yeah, in their post-airing interviews, different places, and say, yeah, it was Trelane. And yeah, Trelane's are Q's. You know, and like, we didn't make that up. Once it was out there from the books, then we decided, okay, fine, let's make it canon. But you didn't make it canon. You made it canon in your interview afterwards, not on screen. Not 100%. You made it 80% canon, but not all the way.
Well, these moments, and there are multiple moments like this throughout Strange New Worlds, for me it feels like they don't want to commit. They don't want to take that leap and actually say...
Notice that.
Trelane, because then they have to explain why years down the road, no one on the Enterprise recognizes any of these people they encounter. I mean, even T'Pring, like nobody knew about her.
I have a headcanon for T'Pring, but this has left me a little.
Yeah.
Unless you just say, you know what, they do the bit here where no one sees him in his true. The audience sees.
Yeah. That's true.
Everybody else sees him as an Andorian or a Vulcan.
Yeah, I felt that was done in a subtle way, too, because I didn't quite pick up on that at first.
It was almost too subtle.
Doing. Yeah, I think it was too subtle. But this is in contrast to, say, on Enterprise, where they encounter Romulans, but they make sure that no one actually sees the Romulans, so they maintain the continuity. Or... they do the same thing with the Borg on Enterprise, where they never call them Borg. Like, we know who they are.
Or the Ferengi, which a lot of people were like, oh, come on, at the time.
But the thing is, no one on the Enterprise there knows who any of these aliens are. So the continuity is maintained at this point. But here you've got people who are on the ship later encountering people who they didn't know earlier on the timeline, so why didn't they know about them later on? So, you know, I mean, look, I don't really care that much. If it's a good story, I'm fine with it. I'm not one of these, like, canon guardians who thinks everything has to line up over 6 decades, but I think if you're going to do that kind of stuff, you need to be careful about how you do it, or be honest about how you do it, or make that one of your big swings where, like, we said screw you to canon. That's a big swing. Just don't try to pretend like it's not the very obvious character that it is.
Well, I read a piece just the other day about, and it went a different direction than I thought. I thought they were going to be attacking the newer shows for being so sloppy with their continuity. And then I thought they were attacking fandom for being too tight-ridged. And what it wound up being was kind of in the middle. They were saying, it was a cautionary note to fandom in the audience that, hey, don't be so hard-assed about it. It's wrong, because, and I don't think of it in this way, but they can, because they're looking at it historically, but I lived through it. It's like, that was the fun. The original series had 80 hours, and there's all kinds of internal contradictions there. Yeah. You know, starting with the fact that we didn't get the term Starfleet till near the end of the first season. Mm-hmm. Much less Federation. So it's like, what is the United Earth Space Probe Agency? I mean, but all kinds of little things. We were canon smoothing, my old term, before retcon was a thing, and gap filling and all of that. But we had to smooth things over even then. And then when the movies came out, it didn't always line up with some of the factoids, especially the stuff that wasn't in your face. But if you looked at if you took the 50,000 foot view, you're like, wait a minute, there's 5 different points that are all kind of subtle. But now that you look at everything after 10 years of constant rewatching, you go, wait a minute, we have to figure out a way to line these 5 points up. Mm-hmm. And we did. So it helps. It's cool when the makers are fanboys and fangirls and give you a cool twist that you didn't see coming. Mm-hmm. But whether it was just a boner, or whether they just stumbled somewhere or whatever, something is sincerely planned, whatever it is, that's not new. I mean, it's like if there's something horrific and we carried it as headcanon publicly for 30 years, or it got written into, forget the novels, because there's no guarantee on that. Mm-hmm. But if we, whatever we did, if we carried it this way for that long a time, fandom and even some of the creatives, and now you have something else new, then you adjust. But there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we've always done. Yeah, and I think apparently I overlooked this. There's a whole generation that thinks that are maybe younger or maybe newer viewers who just I'll comment and I'll say, oh, I'm disappointed you did this, or maybe oh, that's exciting the way the Sarek revelations kind of went. Oh, I care much more about this wacky family now than I ever did back in the day. And don't shoot me, original fans fiction women who did Spock and Sarek and Amanda stories. Mm-hmm. I didn't care that much. It was interesting, but I didn't care. Now I'm like, oh my God, what is this telling us about him and his family and all of Vulcans?
Yeah. Well,
I'm up for that. And apparently we have a faction of fandom that wants everything poured right out of the mold perfect and doesn't see it as fun to retcon and smooth.
Well, I think filling in gaps in characters like that is always something that you can do and can be interesting. Just because you didn't see something on screen doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And there are a lot of people who feel that way. I think that when something on screen does exist and you do something to directly contradict something that's established, maybe if you really want to do it carefully and do it well, or maybe don't do that particular thing if there's no reason to do it, because there are some things that are like very egregious things that would contradict what we already know unnecessarily, rather than, as you and I have said for many years on this show, of adding texture to the Star Trek universe.
Texture, not trivia, meant like you don't have to react and say it's wrong. Now,
that's right.
Here's the thing. There's a difference between if the original series gave us that Kirk's brother was named, George Samuel Kirk, or he called him Sam, and we had that for 40 years. Then all of a sudden we get some episode where Kirk is saying that his brother's name is Fred.
Right.
And we're running out of name slots unless, his folks were really highfalutin and named him George Samuel Frederick Kirk or something.
Yeah, right.
But there's a difference between just the fact that we carried as headcanon for years, we gap filled as much as we canon smooth, and something comes along a little bit later that finesses that. Or again, it took a minute, but I have got the whole Chapel to Pring, Uhura, Pike, Spock to Pring situation under control, and Chapel and all that. And I have that in my head, and it's fine. Because I went back and watched, not something from Strange New, but I went back and watched the moment in Amok Time. And when they're on the bridge and Spock comes up and he has the young to Pring photo on the view screen image, and everybody, and Uhura says, she's lovely, Mr. Spock. Who is that? And he says, that's T'Pring. Well, if you notice, Uhura is never in a scene with T'Pring. When it's the T'Pring episode, because I was like, and then I went back and like, wait a minute, she's always in the B plot or the C plot away. Never sees T'Pring herself. Now but here's Spock. Spock is all in Una's face and Pike's face, and everybody, and Chapel. Okay, but look, McCoy is not here, right? Uhura is not in these scenes. Sulu and Chekhov aren't part of this. So it's like everybody who really sees T'Pring is gone by the time we get to Amok Time, aside from Uhura, who wasn't there. The one person who was is Chapel, obviously. And what does Chapel do when she walks on the bridge? She says nothing. They don't show her saying a word. She's the last person. She comes on after Spock has said, that's blah, blah, blah. And she walks out and she goes, and she gasps. And Spock says, that's my, and who will be my wife? And you see Chapel go, and so it's like, we always went, oh my God, you're married? And what now you can say is Chapel is going, oh my God, T'Pring, I thought she was like long gone. It's her again. Wait, you got married? What? You're getting married? I thought this was a done deal, or I wouldn't have been throwing myself at you these last 2 years. Now I really feel stupid, on top of how stupid I felt throwing myself at you.
Now, have you?
So I could, but there's a difference between just coming. I mean, that was threading a needle.
Yeah.
But I think it's fun, and it made me go back and refresh what I thought about all. I mean, it actually fits. The same way that some of the Sarah Amanda family stuff, they made a big deal about getting Michael Burnham inserted in just the right place. And after Cybok, I say, hey guys, everything is, and the realization that they didn't officially tell Starfleet and the Federation about Pon farr, somehow kept that a secret out of, So but yeah, when something is an absolute, which is what's happening with the timeline but we won't go there. We don't have time. Yeah. I don't mind the core of what you said, though, was my way of looking at what's happening here is I think they run in, and if they're going to blow something up, fine, but tell me what's the new thing. And when they go in and they blow something up and then don't give you the new path, the new landscape, that's what's annoying to me.
Right. All right. Well, I was just thinking about that scene that was cut from the Menagerie where they ask Pike if he remembers T'Pring, and he flashes yes. So,
yes, the famous deleted T'Pring memory scene. Yeah,
he wanted to say yes, Mr. Spock, and it's good to see that you have your shirt on this time, but all he could do was flash yes. So,
what's been your bed jumping count this year, Spock? It's only been 5 years since I saw you last, or whatever.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next one, Shuttle to Kenfori. And this is the third episode. And again, as I said in the second slide, I enjoyed Wedding Bell Blues, even though it was a silly episode. And then in the third one, we get this very serious episode again. So right now, I still feel like things are pretty much on track where they should be. And this was a strong episode, I felt. It was good to see Pike doing something to try to save Batel, but also this episode was a really good one for M'Benga's character that actually leveraged what we've learned about him from the beginning of the series.
I think M'Benga is my favorite character of Strange New Worlds.
He is really good.
With what they've done with him, and unexpectedly, and everything they've done with him and laid in, and I won't go on and on about this, I promise. But I just think it's been unexpected and beautifully done, and it's not like, oh, here's some M'Benga stuff. They take you by surprise, and yet it still makes, and it happens with the What is Starfleet, the documentary series later, or the episode later on. They keep layering in this. It's like, I didn't expect any of this, but it's well done and you're doing it well. And he's grown on me. Babs has grown on me as an actor. Anyway, that was just a huge, pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
But this episode is like three things. It's like a zombie. It's part zombie, part character study for Pike and and Mbenga, and then part the avenging of Jagal.
Mm-hmm.
No, the general turned ambassador. And if there was a follow up to that story, I was expecting something else about Klingon politics. And this is okay. I still wish they would pay that off in a big way, because I kept thinking his death was going to be like L'Rell's more moderate take, not so vicious and brutal.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was going to say that even though he was a problematic character, in the big picture, having him die off after having been this lead, whatever you thought of his past life, as Mbenga has to do, but the leadership that he was showing for that direction to take the Klingons in, and for that to be snuffed out, I thought had to be a huge weakness for L'Rell, because I want to get us to the point where we're invading Organia and threatening war again. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, this would be a perfect way to get there. And we know L'Rell is not still the Chancellor by then. So anyway,
so you're a very hawkish fan. You want to get back into that war stuff on.
I don't want to get there. I'm just going to say that's where you got to get to. So here's a perfect way to get there. Yeah, and so they bring in his daughter. Now, having said that, this whole twisted, convoluted, crazy Vulcan culture logic, I thought was like, Ron Moore couldn't have done it better.
Mm-hmm.
Where she wants to kill him not because he killed her dad, but because he took away the chance for her to kill him herself.
Oh, right.
Basically, what it was is that stupid, twisted honor culture logic.
Yeah. But
she still wants to kill him, but not for the reason you would expect. Yeah.
Yeah. But for Klingons, it makes sense.
And then she goes off and, martyrs herself. Yeah. They turn it around and she does that for the zombie show, which was whack. But anyway.
So, yeah, overall, I thought it was a strong story. Now, the zombie bit, I felt... I don't like zombie movies and shows, so obviously that didn't connect with me very well. But I also felt like it was there largely because zombies are popular. So, hey, why don't we get some zombies in here? And, they should have had Sonequa Martin Green come in and play one of the zombies to get that Walking Dead connection going.
What a lost opportunity. Yeah.
But no, this episode, I thought the costume design was good with the Klingon armor.
That was her father's name. Dakar, sorry.
Dakar, because
I was saying the battle name. Yeah.
Yeah, because we called this episode, our discussion of this episode on Saddle Up, we called the episode Dakar Part 2. Yeah. Because it is the sequel.
Yeah.
To that story.
But then the fourth plot about chasing this plant to help her was a little... Felt a little weak and wacky, but okay. But that's serving what we now know was going to be the season-long arc. Mm-hmm. A very they're trying hard not to have season-long arcs and have them all be standalone episodes. So it's like they soft pedal that, right?
Yeah.
But now it just looked like the weakest part of the episode. It was like, oh, there's this Charybdis plant. Wait, wasn't the Charybdis the name of the colony ship? Yeah. Back in Next Generation from early days of, yeah. Anyway.
All right.
It's the MacGuffin we need to do the thing we needed to do. And yeah.
That's right. Because they need it later on down the road. They need one more piece of the very small puzzle that comes together at the end to turn Batel into a statue. So let's go on to A Space Adventure Hour, the 4th episode. Now this one, when I started teasing this one, I, like a lot of people, thought, okay, so they're going to do a holodeck episode. Now, I didn't mind too much because, of course, the holodeck existed on the animated series. Mm-hmm. And so I was okay with the idea that they're going to use a holodeck. I do think creatively, if it had been me, I don't think I would have used the same yellow grid that they use on the Next Generation.
Yes.
Because that makes you, as a viewer, connect that technology to exactly what is on the Enterprise D. I would have used some other grid or something to make it feel more primitive. But,
and you didn't have that and in the animated series when it was the rec room, and they even referenced that. So I'm like, okay, fine, kudos, good.
I liked when Pike referenced that. I thought that was going to be good. And then he's like, recreation room. So, yeah.
Yeah, which is what, but remember, fans got their panties in a twist when you had the holographic training module on Discovery first season. Right. They were using and people were like, "There's not supposed to be." Well, there's a big difference, and this fit. And the way I survived that headcanon bash was that was a very simple. You know, if there were any people they were shooting at that were holograms, they were literally NPCs. Mm-hmm. They were just there to be shot at like targets. Yep. Not the depth of programming that, and the rec room was just environments that we saw, right? There were no characters. So in this early, like, holography exists, obviously. What you're talking about here and what drove people crazy when Picard went bonkers in the very first in Big Goodbye and went on about it after you'd seen, among other things, Wesley in the stream and then Tasha doing the training module, right? The martial arts. And the difference for everybody was Picard is not that, oh, look, we have these holographics, things that move, because it's been around for 100 years. We have these holograms that are like richly detailed with characters, like how much, which is what they reference here. They have Scotty come in at the end and say that. Mm-hmm. And that's all clinging to a logic line, right? That's doing that. It's just where it started to lose me was, and you get that because that's how they use the holo suites on DS9, right? The whole thing of Our Man Bashir is, you've got to keep this running because it's broken, but we're preserving we're producing we're keeping the main crew alive with their patterns. It's a DS9 episode. You should watch the series sometimes, Chris. But the only way they could save everybody out of the runabout explosion is to preserve their patterns like a transporter, but they had to stick them somewhere, so they stuck them in all the characters of the hologram that was the holodeck that was running at the time. And so all of that was barely clinging to this, but it just loses me. It just gets so clever, turns in on itself and turns in on itself and turns in on itself to the point where she's running. They have to test this thing. It takes way more power than necessary, than anybody expects, almost kills them in the middle of a crisis. Mm-hmm. All of that's fine. It's just that the thing that she calls up is using everybody's existing transporter patterns like the DS9 save, only here it's just for a test. But then the subject matter is a show that never exists. It's kind of like Captain Proton was never a real serial. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, it just gets so convoluted. So now on top of that, we're kind of sort of homaging Star Trek, but not really. But it's so on the nose because the font and the, except this is like a fit, the design. But then, this is what makes it doesn't match. It's more like a 50s Commander Cody, Captain Video, 50s, 40s Flash Gordon serial. Right. It doesn't look like 60s, doesn't even look like Lost in Space.
Right. Yeah.
Much less Star Trek. And anyway, it's not as it pulls that along, and then when they get down to the specific, I didn't mind that the Shatner got pushed. The gene was kind of amazing, I thought. So I didn't mind them making fun of it. I just wish it had been closer. Mm-hmm. I wish it hadn't been a 40s, 50s sci-fi. I wish it had been struggling to try to be something 60s that falls. Kind of like the early years of Doctor Who, maybe, something.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about this one. I didn't really like the making fun of Shatner's speech patterns and such. I kind of like you say, it doesn't feel like 60s, it feels earlier, but I kind of like the color grading and the set design that they did and so forth. But the other things I liked about it are, I thought it was a really good episode for La'an's character.
Yes.
And I did like that they gave a believable explanation for why we don't see the holodeck again until we get to the next generation. That it uses too much power. It's just not really feasible to have this thing running on the ship, because as someone I have a Quest 3 VR headset, and I had a Quest 2 before that, and a Quest Go before that. Like, I've been doing this VR stuff now for about 5 years, and some of the environments that you get into with a Quest 3 are like, you feel like you're there. I've got Myst, which is the classic PC game, but you're actually on the island and you're out there. And of course, it's primitive compared to what we would see in the Next Generation or even what we see here in this episode. But the reality is that we are going to have environments like this by the time we get to the 23rd century. So the progression of having the rec room on the animated series, of having the training thing on Discovery, which I thought made perfect sense, to having advancements here that they test and figure out, well, it's not ready for deployment yet. I think it all makes linear sense. And so this was an episode I was kind of worried about going in from the holodeck aspect of it. And I thought actually they handled it really well and it made sense. I felt like the overall episode itself was the TOS homage, and I'm doing air quotes right here, I thought was kind of silly and unnecessary. The holodeck part, like the murder mystery, I actually thought was really fun, and it was very well acted, as everything on this show is. The cast is fantastic. This goes back to our we only have 10 slots thing, where if you did this episode in a 26 episode season, I would feel very differently about it than I do here. So anyway, you can hear my complete thoughts on this one if you go listen to Saddle Up. Matthew and I discuss all these episodes in depth, but here I'll stick with the positives of what I did like about it.
Yeah. Well, and I have said this, and then he said it on stage at Vegas. So when they were first shooting this, not that we talk a lot unless we're talking, but Jonathan Frakes texted me and asked me if I knew of any video of Gene Roddenberry talking. Well, there's clips online. You can Google it and find it. Anyway, so I did, though, and told him. He told me. He said, we're doing this. He was already in the this is so cool fever. This is so cool. We're, da-da-da. And Anson's doing a take on Gene and wants to be able to kind of echo his voice without it being like an impersonation. And it's going to be, but it's really cool. It's going to be this Hollywood murder mystery on a holodeck, or a film noir murder mystery. He didn't say holodeck. So I was like, I wonder how they're doing it, holodeck scenes, but they're, So anyway, I got the clips and I knew this was coming, but I didn't know what the form would take. So I saw, and I thought it was brilliant. And I just the fact of him doing the thing with his hands on his belly, like resting his hands like that, and then doing his thumbs, kind of, oh, wow. And being that soft-spoken, although some things were a little off. And having them interface, I mean, there was lots of clever stuff in here. It just, I think the overriding part was the 10 slots, as you said. The thing that I did notice while I'm watching it was when she would go into her, I started picking up on this. Spock would just kind of walk in and walk out. I'm like, well, why is he not, did they just cheap out and not want to put an arch or something? You've got the yellow grid. So is it being hard built into an arch or what? Spock it reminded me of the original Saturday Night Live parody, where they're on the bridge, right? And it winds up and Herb Goodman from NBC walks in to cancel the show, and they don't believe it, and they start pulling Spock's ears off, and they just take the props back. John Belushi is Kirk, and he goes, "Where did you come from?" He says, "Sulu, where did these people come from?" And Sulu says, "I don't know." Or one of the characters says, "I don't know, Captain. They just kind of stepped out from behind the curtains."
Right.
As you transition, because they start off as an episode and then it becomes this surreal thing, right? And they pull back and they're pulling the flats down and it's on the stage. But it's funny how they, that's the first time. Anyway, I felt that way too. I'm like, Spock is just like walking in. Why are they not letting him? And I didn't think about it, but it was so after 2 or 3 or 4 entrances and exits, it really started to play on me that he joins her, not without an arch, not without anything. And I thought, are they just being so cheap? They're not animating that in. And then it turns out that, that was the big clue that he was the holodeck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this reminds me of one other thing. I said earlier that if it had been me,
Chris, what was the point of this? Just to get into the Spock-La'an romance? It's like the whole show exists to go dance to dance, and the holodeck winds up just being the thing that connects the opening dance and the closing dance.
Well, it is, because, Larry, if one thing is true about this show, it's that Spock needs a girlfriend. We've got to get Spock a girlfriend somehow, whoever it is. So, no, I said I wouldn't have used the yellow grid if it were me. Spock does eventually call for the arch. And I would not have used that term either, because it's so associated with the Next Generation. Yeah.
That's true. Now, do we... Okay, I want to go back and watch this, because most of the time, though, but don't you remember? He just kind of like appears.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah. He does that over and over. There is one point at which they call for the arch.
But we don't see it.
Yeah.
We still don't see it, though. Right? It's just, you might hear the sound, but he calls for it, and then they just end the scene because they assume everybody knows what that means.
You know, I think I have to go back and rewatch it. I think it's at the very beginning of it all, before they get trapped in there. I think that's what it is.
See, that could be.
Yeah, okay. I think so. All right. Well, let's go on to the next one. So we're going to deal with Spock's other girlfriend, or former girlfriend, Chapel and Corby's adventures in the Temple of Doom here through the lens of a time. And this is another putting one of those puzzle pieces in place for the ultimate season finale, where they go down to, and it's also a callback.
Well, in hindsight, we know that. In hindsight, we know that. As we watched this, we had no clue, right? As we watched this,
we had no clue. But what we did have a clue of is that they are going to the planet that Corby mentions in Wedding Bell Blues, where Trelane said, "Oh, I saw Corby on the old home world." And so this connects into that a bit, and they go down, and we get teased a bit here. I feel like we're going to get some kind of Q connection to the Star Trek universe that also never materializes.
The old homeworld line back in Wedding Bell Blues. I thought that, the second rewatch, I heard that just jumped out at me. Like, wait, what are we saying, that the Q's ancient roots are on this planet? And it was just a throwaway.
That's what it felt like.
Exactly. Yeah. But which, as you say, then, and all the times we went back there, it never figured into anything, except the fact that it must be a really old planet. And all this gibberish that you're seeing of the local culture preserved, including whatever, that it was like, are we seeing the roots of the Q when they were more, humanoid and not so galaxy spanning? Anyway.
Yeah. So the concept of the episode itself, I thought, was interesting, although it's sort of a mishmash of other movies and stories, especially Indiana Jones, Tomb Raider, things like that. One lesson learned from here is, like, if you find glowing objects, do not hold them right up to your eyes. It's always a bad idea.
I had flashbacks to, but I didn't criticize it because so we haven't talked about Gamble. He pops up. There's a lot of new characters popping up that come and go and whatever. Corby here we've got him in Wedding Bell Blues too. So much new stuff popped in with Wedding Bell Blues. And it starts to pay off here, but a lot of people are saying, okay, we're just waiting. Gamble didn't get named until this episode. That's what's hysterical. You saw him episode after episode, like, and what's his name? And what is his name? And then finally it's in a file, and then they finally... But I'm going to say this, and I promise we've gone on so long already, we got the whole season to go. What's amazing to me is, as I watched all these episodes and all the different flavors and watching the debate happen and all that, this was the one, just as an episode, just to watch it for what it was, that drove me crazy. Like almost no modern, not even a modern, none of the discoveries, even the Picards. With the critiques we have of all of that, this drove me crazy because I was flabbergasted, because I was excited. That's the thing. I was excited. It was like an Indiana Jones Tomb Raider. I was like, oh, look, forget the sillies. They're going to a planet. They're going to explore. Okay, yay. We get through the setup, the teaser, the credits. They're on the planet. They're walking around. And about 10 minutes in, something started to bug me. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And I kept watching. And finally it hit me. I was like, am I watching a trained Starfleet crew on an away mission here on a landing party duty? Or am I watching the Scooby-Doo gang?
Right.
I say that because it's like they totally left it's like, what? I'm sorry. They're sticking their hands into things. They're looking, they're guessing, they're eyeballing, they're wondering what's over there. Things close. They go, oh no, we're lost. I'm like, did nobody bring your tricorders and phasers? Now, there's the one line where she says the comms are down.
Yeah.
And we can't call the ship. She never says our scanners are muted too or dampened or whatever. Right? After a while, Chris, I had to stop and rewind and go back to when they first beamed down. And I'm like, I'm looking for tricorder strap. It really started to bug me because I really loved the setup and I loved the show. And I was like, yay, we're getting back into. And then I went, why are they all just running? It's like they're all running around bumping into things. It's like I'm watching a bunch of fifth graders in the 1930s. I don't know. And then I thought, no, it's the Scoobies. They're all just like, oh, what can I see? It's like if they hadn't had Beto's. Oh, and Beto, we hadn't even talked about Beto. If they hadn't had Beto's stupid floaty documentary camera, they wouldn't have figured out the like they don't have tricorders with scanners. They don't have, and then 30 minutes in, all of a sudden they're whipping out their tricorders and she whips out a phaser. Like, you couldn't have blasted that door from the, even if it didn't work, you didn't even try.
Yeah.
And it just accumulated. And Chris, it was such an alien thought to me. I could not remember watching any Star Trek where I feel like I was watching characters who were not living in the Star Trek universe.
It's funny. That's really funny, but actually, yeah, as you described that.
Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I totally get it. Yeah, no, I think that's actually a really good. And it sneaked up on me, and then it hit like a thunderclap, and I actually went back, and then I saw they had I couldn't figure out what made me madder that they didn't leave, that they didn't bring their gear, their standard land. Any kid with an AMT exploration set model kit in the 70s. Mm-hmm. Doesn't know what your every away team has, every landing party has, your phaser communicator tricorder, and she referenced communicators, but everything else is apparently off the scale. Nobody cares. I didn't know what was worse, that they didn't bring anything or that they brought them and didn't use anything. And I went back and I could see the straps. I'm like, shit, they've got their tricorders and no one's using one. Well, they were all so love-struck that they forgot that they had this equipment with them.
I know, it wound up being a couple's weekend.
Yeah, right. Exactly, right. And, well, but on top of that, if my memory is correct, at the beginning, when they mentioned that the comms are down, the door is still open. And she could have just walked over closer to the door. It's like when your cell phone doesn't work. Or
back out the front door and go into the parking lot. And
the hair salon near my house that I go to, my phone works fine on the sidewalk outside, but if I go inside that door and sit on the little sofa that's right by the window, I cannot get a cell phone signal. So when I'm in there, I'm like holding my phone closer and closer and closer to the window. So she could have gone over to the door. The other thing is the door let Chapel in, so at least she could have probably approached it at that point in time without being zapped. And then the other thing is just the fact that, like you said, they're a trained Starfleet crew, but they're standing there having an argument over chain of command and what they should do, which normally shouldn't be happening either. So, but that happened only because of the romantic tension between Spock and Chapel, with Corby being there.
So then we get to the last of the show, and everything starts happening, and they start figuring out. Okay, I thought it was a great puzzle. They're all in different dimensions. I mean, the structure of it. It's just they weren't behaving like Star Trek people there, and they could have still been caught up in the mystery without these. I mean, this is one that I really thought. And this is a script that was mostly finished before the strike. Now, I don't know, other things happened. I don't know what else got in the way. They had budget because they built that piece. It's on the AR. All that moving wall stuff looked awesome and mind-boggling, and that they're using the AR wall. But the other thing that got me was at the end, you get to the virtual, like the key, the hub of the virtuality, and they're all pulling in their different. They pull out these parts, and they have names for things. And they all know where things go. And we don't see them figure it out, or they just start calling things by a name, and they know right where things go. And I'm like, did they figure it out and just forget to tell the audience?
Yeah,
or
we missed the briefing. So
we missed the briefing for this
before they went down. Yeah,
Chris, I am not a Star Trek hater. You may know this. But I had not reacted to a show like this, and I could not remember the last time I reacted to a show like this.
That's funny.
And so I thought, but I have a logical, I had the Vulcan on this, and the only thing for my sanity and for my love of the series, and especially this one, we all love Strange New World. I thought, did they get to a place where they had to make, it's digital, not cutting to a network, slots with commercials. But did they get to a point where they had to drop footage? Like, did they have to make some really severe edits for some reason? They either lost a visual effect that a scene depended on, and they had, because there's times when just the logic flow just at the end makes no sense either. They're just whipping out things and sticking things in places, and we didn't see how they feel. And I swear to God, there's one time when Spock, he doesn't call attention to it verbally, but he has one of these gizmos that they're coming up with, right?
Yeah.
He finds there's something in his hand that we haven't been introduced to. And and the camera gives us an insert of it, like it's important. He doesn't talk about, he might obliquely say something, but he's talking about something else, but we see him holding this thing in his hand. Then it cuts away to one of the other couples. And then the next time it comes back, Spock is getting out from under that cabinet console. Like he's been underneath there with Uhura, welding a thing if it was on the bridge. But he's coming out from under and his hand that was holding that the last time his hand is kind of dragging behind. Like, did he just insert that into something in the bottom? Because otherwise we don't know where the thing went that was in his hand that was so important for 5 seconds.
Yeah. It does make you wonder if something was cut, right? Yeah.
And it's never referred to. It's never mentioned. And it's odd by itself, but it's an avalanche of this stuff. And why is there a Chinese panel there? Well,
that was one I wondered about. And then when we finally get to the finale, and we still don't get any explanation for.
Oh no! Now it's Swahili. Well, if it's reading a person's mind for their native, the way it would happen, and that's very original.
That could be interesting if that's what it's doing.
But it's not. It's not explained or.
But it's not
down.
explained, and so then it makes me wonder if the Vesda were on Earth thousands of years ago and on all these other planets, and that's why all these languages are popping up. So it raises a lot of questions that aren't.
I just wanted the Vesda to be Red Jack. Anyway, that was a frustrating episode, but what it was, I admired their everything about it, except it was just it left me the weirdest. I went into that episode loving that they were doing something in this tone, and it felt very grounded, and then it felt like the weirdest Star Trek of all. Like I said, it could have been the Scoobies down there running.
Well, let's not forget that the episode started off with Nurse Chapel becoming an expert archaeologist after only a 3-month internship. So,
yes. Well, she's very bright. That's how she gets where she...
Yeah. I mean, this kind of stuff to me comes down a lot to a feeling I have in general about the writing on this show, especially in this season, is that the writers have these ideas and they think they're clever and interesting, and a lot of them are clever and interesting ideas, but they're not very adept at actually turning those ideas into real stories. And so you get bits and pieces of them that are interesting in isolation, but when you try to put it all together to a story, sometimes you're left scratching your head about how this stuff fits together.
Yeah. And again, I mentioned it, we're about to hit show 6.
Yeah.
But the first 5 ostensibly were basically written before the strike interruption.
Right. Okay. So now we're at episode 6, The Sehlat Who Ate Its Tail, which, as you've mentioned, was disrupted by the strike halfway through its birthing. And so this one I did find, just jumping to the resolution of it, it kind of reminded me of something like the 37s or the Royale, or these kinds of stories where we find humans out in space somewhere, and they don't necessarily make a lot of sense, but they're kind of interesting. And the explanation of who these humans were and why they left Earth is also interesting on the surface, But then on the other hand, it's like, okay, so the planet is in extreme danger. So let's just take all of our smartest people and send them off into space.
Well, I would have, years ago, I would have said that's kind of crazy. But some of the things that have been expounded lately by people who have the money to pull this off, like our tech bros, I can see them. They've either said something like this. Maybe not to save the planet, but just go start over somewhere. So that's an Elon idea, I think. But I thought it was interesting. But by the time you got to see, it was a great twist. It was an old Twilight Zone type Star Trek twist. It was cool,
right? Yeah.
Except for the setup facts you were getting with it, which was it was after the war, but before First Contact, which is only like technically until. The timeline that Akiva has blown up, does that affect this too? That's like a 6-year stretch. But it also implied to me was that you saw this gleaming craft they were getting on, right? That you said was at the core of this built up. There's an American flag on there. Couldn't count the stars, but there's an American flag. There's a NASA symbol. There's not a U spot. Some of the cooler, Jeff Mandel, Mike Okuda graphics that was part of Picard because they brought the Golden Era team back to work on details. But I'm just saying, if they launched in this craft with those logos on it and insignia, then that implies it's after the war. To me, that suddenly implies that there was a functioning structural government of some kind, but the world hadn't blown up, and which made me go back and look at Zefram Cochrane and Bozeman in First Contact and scavenging around to put the Phoenix together and stick it on top of one of the missiles that didn't fire to use it as a booster for orbit. And I'm going, okay, suddenly Zefram Cochrane and Lilly's accomplishment isn't these, ridiculously against the odds scientists scrounging around to come up with the first warp engine, test warp engine. It's the world is not nearly as doomed and in shambles as we think, and it's just the fact that they're up in Bozeman, Montana, out in the wilds anyway. So that's what I mean. By the time that sunk in, I'm like, wait a minute. If that's truly all accurate, then apparently the world is not in a shambles overall, and it's just Cochrane and Lilly are out there on their own doing this on their own. Yeah,
it could be. Communication
unless
channels.
You have another angle on it.
Broken down. Well, not really. I think what you're saying all makes sense if you're trying to tie it all together. I was just thinking maybe this craft, because
Chris, why are we Star Trek fans? I mean, I'm sorry, maybe.
The fact that the NASA logo is on it makes me think that it had already been built. It existed before the war, and it survived the war. And
there's that.
Therefore,
or they could just be honoring these institutions of which used to exist, but now will.
They could.
That's what we grew up seeing. So let's stick it on there anyway, even though it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, they could be sticker collectors. They like to slap stickers. I mean, you should see their notebooks and their laptops. It's probably, we didn't get to see the other side of the ship. There's probably gigantic Pokemon stickers on the other side. So
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I thought I didn't take this one until that revelation at the end. I didn't take this one all that seriously, really, in terms of who these people were, because the ship itself looks like this giant creature, and you start thinking about, okay, well, how did they build that ship over all this time?
Looked very Mad Maxy in space.
Yeah. And so, and then all the way through, it felt like an episode of, okay, we're getting a glimpse of who Kirk was before he became the Kirk that we know, which I don't know if I totally...
That was the point of the episode.
That was the point of the episode. And I don't know if I totally buy that he would have been that indecisive or uncertain about himself or retreated the way he did, but okay, and it was also a bit about Kirk and Spock's relationship starting to come together. So, it's okay for this. I think at the end, though, when we got to the revelation, and then Pelia tells the whole story because she was actually there. She remembers it because she had a little break where she wasn't doing drugs, and she remembered what she saw on the news. And she told the story in an accent that was at least somewhat comprehensible to us as viewers. That felt like a very unexpected twist, but I kind of liked that. Like you said, it's kind of like a Twilight Zone ending. Like you get to the end, and then there's this kind of odd reveal to it. So I thought overall, as an episode, I thought it was pretty good, especially considering what had happened through the season at that point. I'm like, okay, they're getting back to an episode that actually does have some meat at its core. Like Kirk has to figure out what to do, and then in the end, he has to deal with the fact that he killed a bunch of humans.
Yeah, some of that tone and just kind of piling on them. And here's a case where the whole thing about using the phones.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The phones.
In a normal season, that would have been pushing the envelope and been kind of funny. And I thought they pulled it off. And the fact you've got Pelia there with her storehouse of it's like it's like the TARDIS of junk in there. It's like whatever you need to do now, whatever you need, she's going to have it. It's like on Enterprise, if you needed a wacko creature or a plant, well, Phlox had it in his menagerie. It's like it's just in there somewhere. We'll hear about it when we need it.
That's right. And I love
so
the
she's
fact,
got this. She's got this, room of many holdings or whatever you want.
Yeah, I love the fact that she had an Atari 2600 in there as well.
Yeah,
the phone thing. Yeah. See, I actually thought the phone thing was kind of funny. That actually made more sense to me that they could wire these phones up than the fact that, number one, firing a thruster would move the ship enough to get them onto the right trajectory. But this is maybe the sad thing in terms of commentary on the overall season up to this point, is that I felt that the whole phone gag, I felt like they were kind of restraining themselves. Like they wanted to put some humor in the story, but they were like backing off and taking it easy. So I thought that wiring these phones up all over the ship was sort of like them being restrained in their silliness. So what does that say about what was going on overall?
That's what I mean. It's like, yeah. And I don't know if it's like compared to the silliness factor of all those other episodes, then it's like, oh, well, they're just dragging phones out and hooking them up to save the ship. Yeah. It made it even look less than what we might have thought about it.
But I did think it was funny to me. I like the phone bit. Okay, so let's move on then to what is Starfleet. So here we finally find out why Betos was flying the little camera drone around in the Indiana Jones episode as part of his filming of everything for this documentary. So now this is a case where they do something really different, really unusual, but actually I thought this was kind of a fun way to play with Star Trek, to do it in a documentary format, as if you're living in that universe and you've turned on the History Channel or whatever, and you're being presented as a layperson, you're being presented with, this is what our military is doing. And here's a glimpse inside.
Yeah, the tone of that, the fact that he was a documentary person who'd been given carte blanche and it was supposed to be for the centennial and yada yada, and then they pay it off with this. First thing I noticed was just looking at the queue on the streaming. This was only 40 minutes.
It was
This was like the second shortest or third shortest episode of any of the modern Treks, and way shorter than because everything else had to stretch for a network hour of commercials, right?
I think there's a 38-minute episode of Discovery.
Yes. Yeah, there's one shorter. So, and then I thought, well, why was that? And several things, again, we're learning stuff post-airing. One was that there's a lot of improv. Again, I love Mbinga in this. I love those dead on when he's just shooting the documentary and we are not aware of a big plot. I love the wacky security camera angles. I thought that was cool to see the bridge and some of the rooms from different.
I thought it was cool that they put ID numbers on it so that it actually felt like a real thing. Like they actually have a system for this. Yeah.
And I thought it was very daring and then after he's kind of been banned, which was interesting, and he's having to rely on the security cam footage. And when they're in the ready room, by the way, the world's biggest, I totally get that there's a refit because that ready room goes from like a hotel banquet rentable room down down to a tiny little cabin like you'd get for Picard later on, or the brief or whatever. Kirk's, but when they have the bit of Pike and Una at that far corner with their backs to the security camera in the far corner, and you literally have to kind of like either turn your volume up, or you have to like, you feel yourself leaning in because it was a very private, off the cuff, not supposed to really be recorded
the one
conversation.
when they're talking to April but we can't see him.
There's two, first, and then there's another scene later where they're talking. Yeah. And both times I'm like, oh, this is great, because like you're really they brought the volume down low and made you listen. And so there's aspects of it being a documentary. One thing was interesting that I heard the writers say later. I think it was Alan McElroy say that there was a moment where they thought they'd have a final scene of the crew watching Beto screen it for them.
Oh,
and they said, no, let's not do that, because as you said at the beginning, the intention was for this to be, the whole episode that we see is meant to be the documentary. Mm-hmm. And if they'd had the crew watching it at the end, that would have broke that convention, and it would have messed. So they did it the way they did it on purpose. Now, they still tell a story with dramatic structure because he gets kicked off, and now we're using security cameras to watch the scenes, like when Uhura and Beto are in there together, or he and his sister, he and Ortegas are talking. Mm. And some of those moments that would happen if it was just a scripted episode. But the biggest thing about this is almost that the actual core mission at the middle of it is like, I laughed later on, I said, I think that was like the most Star Trek plot of the whole season. And it winds up being the obligatory plot in the middle of the thing he's filming that he happens to catch him doing for his documentary timing. Mm-hmm. But it was a cool idea. I was almost like, did you have to waste it on this? That would have been cool to have been fleshed out a little more. Do you think?
Yeah, no, I think, exactly. And it probably will make a good novel to expand on it. Now, did you catch the tie-in to the Star Trek films that was thrown in here as a little foreshadowing to the future of Star Trek?
I'm sure I did, but it's been so long now, I'm thinking back. I'm looking at my notes from the time. Now
we know in Star Trek 4 why Spock decided that must be whale song that they're hearing, because here he's got the underwater creature and they're analyzing the sound. So we got a little
that's absolutely
tie in there. So, all right. Okay. Well, let's jump ahead to the next one, which is 4.5 Vulcans. Where once again, the writers of Star Trek forget that genetics does not equal culture. Is that what we say?
Yeah. And again, if this had been the goofy episode of the season, maybe we forgive a lot of that. But now it's like, now they all have to compete against each other for attention. So we're gonna.
See, I feel like the origins of this episode is that someone had this vision of them walking down the corridor in Vulcan gear with Pike carrying a Lurpa. And then they decided, well, maybe we could build a story around this. I've got this idea. Because he even takes the Lurpa with him down to the planet.
Yes. I said, you know what? I'm just going to again. We're gonna re-examine our assumptions that we've held for decent reasons, but apparently they were missing some important fact. Like all these years, apparently Klingons look at a knife and can get 92 different uses out of it. So apparently, Vulcans, the Lurpa is not just it makes a great engineering tool as well.
You should see those late night infomercials on Vulcan for the Lurpa.
It dices, it slices, it saves your radioactive generator.
Yeah. So I don't know. This episode, again, if this episode had been in a 26 episode season, I would have viewed it as probably like a Prophet and Lace, but maybe like a Spock's Brain. But I really did not like this episode, and I think part of it is because we were in the 7th slot of 10 slots.
Yes.
And there was so much stuff hanging in the air that I'm wondering about, and nothing seems to be coming together. We don't know what's going on with Patel and what's going on with the Vesda, and are the Q related in some way, and where's the Gorn? Are they finally done with that? And instead of us building towards some kind of resolution to all of this with 3 episodes to go in the season, we get this with them crawling around on the floor. And, you know, I've every time they do this, and the thing that pops in my head is Extinction on Enterprise, which shockingly was directed by LeVar Burton, which still blows my mind. Don't do the transformation crawling around on the floor stuff. It never works. It always looks ridiculous.
And again, there's pieces of this that I enjoyed. For one thing, I thought, okay, well, Beto's done his documentary. He's gone. Oh, look, he's still here. Well, you know, at the beginning of the year, they said we wanted to have a love interest for Uhura because it's apparently the year of the couples.
It's
right?
the year of the couples, yeah.
It's the year of the couples. And the year of the couples pants. And so, okay, so he's going to be around. So this is number 7. Well, guess who is not around for the last 3 episodes of the season? I'm like, okay. So they had, and then it's like they're Vulcans, but they're making interesting choices. And so, okay, so Pike is I saw somebody say, Pike is being the Vulcan that non-Star Trek fans think Vulcans are like.
Yeah, I thought he was a Conehead from Saturday Night Live.
That's the other half of the world, thought he was a Remulac. But, you know, and so here's Chapel being hyper, kind of the way Spock might have been hyper if he'd been, you know, wound up and all. Mm-hmm. But of all, and Uhura was like kind of, to me, blending into being the most settled Vulcan. But the fact that she was, then she turns out to be controlling to the point she's apologizing later. And it's interesting. I saw younger fans looking at this through very PC eyes. Right. They were criticizing all the Vulcans. But what I thought was the coolest and most intriguing, and I guess they did too, because it's the one they didn't easily wrap up, was La'an. And I was thinking, so what is she going like Romulan?
Yeah, right.
And they kind of mentioned that, but then they talked about, oh, maybe it's the augment inner. And so I'm like, well, pick one or the other, or is it both? What are you doing here?
I think they were going for the Romulan part, because otherwise, why would they have her and Pike both mentioned to each other? They
go through that bit about
why would
Romulans.
They have that bit about Romulans, yes. Right? So,
but then they did bring up the augment bit for a minute.
Yeah.
So I was a little. So what?
I guess both. Maybe both of them together kind of supercharged her.
Or to quote a famous dead Commodore, both, neither. I don't know.
So,
Matthew Decker, the Doomsday Machine. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of the Doomsday Machine, I forgot to mention when we talked about the Sehlat who ate its tail at the very beginning, when the beam comes down, hits the planet. Did you also think that it might be the Doomsday Machine?
Totally mentioned that in Second Opinion. Yes, I totally thought that was going to be a tie-in to.
Yeah,
and one that made a lot of cool sense. But then it was so cartoony. I thought, oh, yeah.
So back to this one. I mean, the whole episode, I feel like it was just a kind of like a bad idea from the start because they're playing on these kind of stereotypes of Vulcans, and it's like each characteristic of a Vulcan that we think of, they split that up into 4 people. I did think Nurse Chapel's made a good bit of sense because she did the stuff that she would have already been doing anyway. She's just more focused. Although the idea that she would like get rid of all of her friends because they're wasting her time, I'm not sure if that fit her personality.
And she when she was talking to Corby on the screen, I'm like, really? He's going to get a view screen scene? He's going to be in the. He turns up later on,
but there's contract.
Things are flying by, and I'm like, really? What?
But I thought, the line part I thought made sense for her character as well. So, I mean, there are aspects of this episode that I thought were good. There are episodes I thought were kind of off the wall. I think the whole Patton Oswalt thing, playing a Vulcan whose parents loved humans, who was a love interest for number 1, it was sort of a mix of really weird and silly, and then kind of also unusual and interesting at the same time.
I like the fact that somebody woke up and realized that they're not giving Rebecca and Una enough to do. It feels like she's always just around, and aside from Ad Aspera last season, like what has she really been? So this was like a gem for her. By the way, when she was in the murder mystery in the holodeck and she was the blonde who dies early, and supposedly she was kind of quasi channeling Lucy as a studio woman, they come to the scene and you instantly can tell the regular cast / characters who's who. But I thought my first take was, why do they have everybody else with speaking roles being from the cast and not that blonde woman? And then I was like, oh, that's Rebecca. Oh, okay. So this is like good on the makeup and hair team, because I didn't realize that was her. I thought it was going to be like the one-off character who dies quickly, and she does. But then I was like, oh wait, that was her. So anyway, but that scene, I'm that way too. I'm so totally yin and yang on it, because Patton Oswalt's fine, but I'm not a huge Patton Oswalt fan. So it was like, oh, this is so cool, that Patton. But it was cool, and it's stunt casting, and it gets more eyeballs to Star Trek, and he's an awesome big fan, and celebrity fans, yay, we've always had him. That's all cool.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know if it totally clicked with the fact that they wrote it for her and did that and went there. And then I actually thought she and Ethan played off each other really well for that, because they never, aside from like rough command situations and adventure, like when does she get a moment to do something like this? And when did those two have a scene like that? And knocking the drink over and all the goofy sitcom-y stuff, I actually, heaven help me, but I actually thought most of it worked. I just thought it kind of went on for a long time.
Yeah.
All so that we had to have, and the whole reason he was there, aside to give him a cameo, was dramatically we needed a Katra expert. Like, okay, Spock, you can't just go check this out in the library computer. You have to have a Katra. That kind of was like, what? But anyway. Well, my biggest thing was the whole 15-minute, because whenever I see one of those 15-minute fight scenes, I just go back to Jason Bourne and go, okay, that works. Any other comic book, Marvel superhero movie where there's the 15-minute fight, it just is old and tired to me. And that includes Benedict Cumberbatch Con in Star Trek Into Darkness on that flying shuttle, where they just Jason Bourne fight for 15 minutes flying laterally. And I'm like, oh, please save me from this. And I get it that they were going to flip the fight into a love clinch, and it was surreal. It wasn't reality. It was in her brain, yada, yada. But I admired it intellectually, but not really in the moment.
Yeah. But we did get to see Cetacean Ops in live action finally. So
in her brain.
But the other thing about like using time for that type of thing in there is that we got shortchanged on what would have been the most interesting part of the episode, which is what actually happened inside their heads that made them decide to come back.
Yes,
right.
You missed the other three.
Completely brushed under the rug.
That's like, we didn't mention it, but that's like back in Hegemony. They talk about the 2,000 people who were remember the first part one when they went on location and they had 2,000 survivors, and they just go, oh, we beamed the 2,000 survivors up. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
They do that at times. I noticed that there'd be all these huge, like Greek off-screen major moments that okay, good for them for talking, and they didn't have to spend the money to do it. And I get all that. It just threw me occasionally. They'd say, oh yeah, and we saved the 19 different planets.
Exactly.
It's like,
and here it's like, and all of your crewmates are fine now.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, well, let's move on. Terrarium is the last episode.
Amazing. I was glad to have a little Star Trek in my Star Trek.
Yeah. Did you not feel that this is an episode that they've done over and over, however?
Oh, yeah. Well, I love all the people who say, this is just ripping off Enemy Mine. I'm saying, no, this is ripping off Dawn on Enterprise, which ripped off The Enemy on TNG, which ripped off Enemy Mine, unless you want to call it an homage.
Yeah. But this episode is Dawn. I mean, that's the first thing I thought of when I watched it, was like, they're basically redoing Dawn. I felt like Dawn is a more interesting episode than this one. I like this episode, but the reason I like this episode is that they gave Ortegas something to do, and they developed her character, and I thought that Melissa Navia did a really nice job with the episode.
Knocked it totally out of the park.
Yeah.
And you know what? And the technology and it's not technology, it's an actor in a technology suit. Mm-hmm. But I thought that was amazing, what they were able to pull off with that. Warren Shearer is credited. He's the Gorn. You really care about the technology and his acting underneath it, but they were able to pull off a real character in there and make you care and make you feel. There's no CGI there except from a little bit of touching up, because it was mainly the mechanical mask and the thing, and the eyes and the hands, and you make it care. Yeah, it's basically a duet, and you do care, and you want to scream at the end when they show up, and you know.
Yeah. Now, I do have to ask you, since seeing this, you have not taken up the practice of eating the pieces when you win board games, right?
Well, I didn't. I'm just being cheap, Chris. I'm not gonna reorder the add-on edible pieces from Monopoly and Risk and.
Oh, I'm sure if you go to StarTrek.com, they've got some collaboration going with somebody now. Maybe,
gummy tokens.
Yeah. Gummy edible game pieces or something like that. Now, I mentioned Star Trek 4 and the whales earlier. Now, this episode also lets Spock know how to handle a future situation. Did you pick up on that one?
Okay, I'm going to just say that I probably did, but it's been so long since I've thought about some of these angles.
Okay, well, so how does Spock save everybody in the Galileo 7?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Yes.
He learned to ignite the gas, ignite the atmosphere, get attention by setting something on fire. So
when you're on your dying breath and everyone's all but given up on you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned crying at the end. The Metrons. I mean, how dense are the Metrons? So,
well, I was talking about the Gorn dying, but you're absolutely right. I didn't mind the Metron.
Okay.
It just did they plan this 3 years ago? We're going to go just have fun with Gorn, and then we'll have one scene in our last Gorn episode where we tie it all up and say, "Oh, nope, you're fresh for Arena."
Yeah. So I feel like we've been watching a slow motion realization that the Gorn don't make any sense. That the writers and the producers feel like we've really created a mess with this whole Gorn thing, and we've got to get out of it somehow. And so this episode, I thought, okay, so they're showing us a completely different side of the Gorn here. Like they're pardon the term, but they're humanizing the Gorn. They're reptilizing the Gorn. I don't know whether they're actually making the Gorn real.
Wait, Chris, you haven't wondered for 2 years what the Gorn's favorite board game is? Edible or not?
Yeah, it's a game called Big Lizard in My Backyard. It's from the makers of Hungry Hungry Hippos. Mm-hmm. I just felt like we've been watching this slow motion realization that the Gorn don't make sense. And so they've been trying to find a way out of it. And then here it seemed like, oh, we're going to get to see another side of them now. But then at the very end, they tack on this ridiculous ending of the Metrons coming down and saying, yeah, it was all a test. We staged the test. And, maybe we're going to need more data points in the future. So you might see one of these tests again down the road. I'm like, how many tests, how many data points do you need to figure out that two enemies might fight each other if you stick them down together?
Where would Star Trek be without stupid super aliens who just love them some tests? What else is there left to do? I mean, how many different, even in the next generation,
So I feel like, again, they're looking for a way out of this Gorn thing. And then because of the Metron connection, it's like, okay, how about for our encore, we bring out the Metrons?
Well, I know a lot of people would say, aside from that, but a lot of people say, just end the show with her tragically watching the Gorn. By the way, did you see the final credits? They don't mention it on screen, but that was actually Hugh Gorn. Did you?
Hugh Gorn.
I'm just kidding. the humanizing element of individual of the otherwise
Hugh Gorn. Yeah.
Hugh Gorn. No, not really. No,
Gorn.
That it takes completely takes away from the pain and the tragedy of the show. Not just that for the big picture of Gorn background, but the fact that they're all going to. And then there's this lingering question I think they actually, isn't there a line which is, oh, well, you'll all remember this immediate incident, but the world at large is going to forget about Gorns and what you've learned about them. So they let, because they want the little dramatic moment at the end of Ortega's feeling the pain of losing the person.
Yeah. They say you'll keep what you experienced with you.
Yes, you'll keep what you've experienced. So
it's like real. Yeah.
It's like, what? How do you have your cake and eat it too? We're going to wipe your memory of the Gorn at large, but you'll remember you were with an alien you didn't know and have some pathos, that tragically lost. Yeah. Anyway, I just thought it was a little,
Yeah. Well, the other thing that comes from this at the end is that Ortegas is upset with La'an for killing the Gorn, and it seems like that's going to be a real sticking point for their relationship, and we don't know how that's going to be resolved. And we still don't know how it's going to be resolved, because as we move into the final episode, New Life and New Civilizations, that quickly just kind of goes away, and we don't really have any real aftermath.
Chris, do you want standalone episodes that homage the original series, or don't you? What carried over from episode to episode?
All right, so I'm still not sure that I understand the connection between the title of this episode and the actual story of the episode. Although, as we mentioned earlier on, they have said that
so finale-ish, doesn't it?
Well, that's what I was going to say. They said they did write this so that it could serve as a series finale if they didn't get a fourth season. Now, what's the final? I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say this. I know we don't normally say these words, but what's the title of the final episode of Enterprise? These are the Voyages.
Mm-hmm.
New Life and New Civilizations. We're taking these finale titles from the monologue of Star Trek. That's the only thing I can think of where it comes from, because otherwise I don't think this title actually connects with what happens in this episode very well at all. Well,
yeah. I didn't mention before my favorite episode of the season for just sounding like it didn't have anything to do with Star Trek, except it tried to do it at its core. But through the lens of time, I kept trying to figure out what was the time. Through the lens of dimension, maybe.
Dimensions would have made more sense.
Yeah. But the whole thing of, it took me months to remember the name of the title because it makes no sense. So, but this is just generic slap on a Star Trek thing title.
Yeah. So they pull all the threads together here. We find out that Batel is actually the statue that's keeping the Vezda locked away. And not only is she the statue, but she's always been the statue.
Yeah. Who knew?
So we called this episode on Saddle Up, we called it Pike and Batel's Nexus Adventure.
The Nexus did indeed come to mind for me a lot.
So it's not exactly the Nexus, but it's this sort of like the inner light and the Nexus kind of mixed together.
Mm-hmm.
I have mixed feelings about that part of the story as well. I appreciate some of what it does for Pike and for the relationship. And then again, I think in part because they didn't know if they were going to get any more episodes to work with. They kind of rushed us through this story. But the resolution of it to me felt like Pike's future is wide open now. Like I feel like they're trying to find a way to get out of the eventual...
The death that we know is coming. Or not, he never died.
It's not a death, fate. But they're trying to rewind that. Now, some of our listeners to Saddle Up pointed out, and I thought this was a really good observation, that experience that he had with Batel, with the memories that she shared with him, may very well prepare him in the future to be able to accept that life with Vina back on Talos 4.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's sad is I had a lot of, I don't want to say aggravation because I hate to say I didn't care that much. I was just say, relatively speaking, I thought that that future forward reel was really well done and intriguing, and may have been one of the best pieces of film that we got the whole season. Even though, and the knocking was a little annoying because they never paid it off. It's just a device. It's just a cool dramatic.
Well, they just got to keep it moving along, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was a thing they needed, but it just felt like at the beginning, as you realize that, that's a thing that's showing the passage of time, and it's not real and it's not linear, and then when it just had nothing, it was just a device. It didn't mean anything else. I felt a little. Kind of like the way I did with that camera movement of Lon at the beginning that I thought was going to mean something. And it was just a device to keep it moving along. And it was like watching the finale chapter, the tacked on epilogue at the end of Discovery. A little bit. Because you're like, here's their kid. And the kid, it's April's. Oh, she's marrying April's. Or they're hanging together at least.
In that case, they had to go back and write an ending. Right. They went back for Discovery, they went back and wrote an ending,
right,
after the fact to kind of tack on to the story, right, to make it work as a finale.
Exactly, and to give it some finality. And if and that's a big part of what they say. They were hedging their bets of whether this would be the series finale or not. Everybody had been lying to them that they were the greatest Star Trek of the modern age since sliced bread. If that had all been a lie, they were told.
Yeah.
I mean. And Anson and Melanie have incredible chemistry, and it really came through in that sequence. It was just very sweet, and I thought the makeup carried along. The last one there or two, it was very sweet, and then you're like jerked back to the reality of the moment. But the whole thing with the Vesda and I thought the other planets, like the geography, was cool. Why the things that are floating are there, but they look cool. I guess we don't have to know that. It looked like it was a costume. Like, how many times are they in the native costumes? And there's like 2 different sets of party civvies in this episode. And it's like, hey, look, guys, we've got some costume budget. Let's spend it all in this. We got to get it spent or, use it or lose it. There were just some interesting just angles to this as a finale. And I can't, when Pelia goes into her, she's done this once or twice. She's hysterical, like the whole, the Grateful Dead and all that. But then she goes into these, when those moments and you're like, okay, she's going to snap out of it. And like, she's playing for Beto's camera, but she's not. She's like really seriously, the sky would rain demons.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, did you have a moment where you wondered if the Vesda were going to turn out to be the Iconians because of the portals? And they called them demons, and I keep thinking of the demons of air and darkness.
Demons of air and darkness, yeah. Yeah.
And I wondered if they were going to reveal them to have an Iconian, to be the Iconians or be an Iconian link. Like the Vesda was the native name for what everybody called the Iconians. But no.
No, I didn't. I mean, that all makes sense, of course. I didn't think about that one because I was still thinking like they were trying to somehow connect the Q, and that maybe the Q were responsible for
pick one. Can we
the
just
gateways or something, and the Q had conquered this ancient evil, and also we had this theory that maybe Batel's reaction to Gamble a number of episodes back was because the Gorn had past experiences with the Vesda, and so there was some like bad blood. So we were kind of going down those paths, and I didn't really think about the Iconians in this case, but yeah, that makes sense.
Again, I didn't think about them either aside from the portal bit, but then when she called them demons, I was like, I immediately thought of demons of air and darkness and went, are they going to go there? But no.
So this episode, like, this is what I said on Saddle Up at the end, was like, it's not a bad episode. It's fine. But as a finale for everything that they had been putting together for the season, I felt like it was a giant letdown because the Vesda feel like they were just props to have a resolution to the Batel story and to tease us with the Q. And it didn't really go anywhere. Like, we still don't really know anything about them, where they come from, who they are, why they're evil, how they terrorized the universe or anything. Like, it's an interesting concept that was not explored at all. And the necessary time to deal with Pike's story, in case this was the last episode, took up a lot of time that could have gone to other things. So I wonder, like, if they had known that they were going to have at least a season 4 and they didn't need to wrap all that stuff up, do you think this episode would have played out very differently and been a much more interesting episode? Or were the threads just not pulled together enough at this point through the first 9 episodes to even make it work in that case?
I don't know, because even if that wasn't a question, so on second opinion, what came to me, which I didn't think about until I was putting my thoughts down, I was making points, and then some of the points started leading me to a couple of ideas that I didn't get the first 2 times I watched the show, which was, it was an interesting show. It was bittersweet, mainly because of the Pike Battelle bit. I had problems, going back to Vadia 9 or whatever was okay, and then going back to the new planet. The costumes were wacky. Again, this one has Swahili. Well, you've got Uhura and Mbinga looking at it. So are we just supposed to pick up that it's trying to, appeal to the people who's standing in front of it? And
which is very possible. Yeah.
Which is possible, but it was totally not given.
It's not explained at all. Yeah.
That's a little bit of a leap, and I don't mind not being led by the nose and having everything be on the nose. That'd be great if it just was not kind of the thing that happened. And I like the way that Jenna Mitchell is in here too, and Sam Kerr. I mean, they brought there was a finale feel to it because they brought everybody back. I'm glad poor Chris Myers got to be Ensign Gamble and in that thing.
And he was really good in these episodes, though. Yes. As an actor, I thought he was really excellent.
Yes. I thought he was good as the young kid and the young nurse. But what really got me was, well, and I also was hoping if the Vesda weren't going to be the Iconians, I was like, well, they're so weird and wacky and kind of nondescript. Like, can they be the evil that the Zot Vash worshipped?
Oh.
Like the Capellians trying to, except those were synths. Yeah. They were synths. These Vesda aren't synthetic; they're organics. But anyway, we still don't know who bottled up the Vesda in the first place.
Right. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I would expect to find out after all.
And if that was on Vadia 9 where they were bottled up, was that the ancient Q? Since that was their home world. Yeah. See, that I was wondering about that. But in the big picture, I went, okay, so what is, like you were saying, what is this season about? And so there were like moments in all the episodes that I enjoyed. There was some interesting points. I thought it was bittersweet. The sequence with Pike and Battelle. But I still didn't like, what was the frame of the season? That's what I said. Canonically, philosophically, emotionally, we had all these couples. We kid about it, but there were all these couples all year long that seemed like it was a primary motivation. Was there a thing to the season or not?
Yeah.
What are you left with? And then in this last episode, I mean, and then in this single episode, the one thing I really I don't go this way anyway, but when they're having it got very comic booky for me. But not even so much, when they're sitting there when they're standing there with their hands, when Battelle going into statue stage and the Vesda God guy, escape guy, poor Gamble. But when they're doing, and they've got the glowy, sparkly hand things, I'm like, what did I fall through a time? Am I watching like a Xena or a Buffy? Because I never watched those shows for the exact exact reason.
Right.
I mean, DS9 got there with what's the DS9 where they were paw race doing the old "I'm going to stand here and hurl fireballs at you" crap.
Yeah. Well, is that in Rapture? I think it's in Rapture.
It's Rapture. Yeah. I started to say Rapture and I didn't know. That's what I was like. Oh, we're going to go here. Are we going to go into this? Okay, fine. The pseudo magic.
Yeah.
I said the smoky, dry ice hands.
Well, it's like, they clearly...
But then they covered it because he said, we're talking about a science so advanced, it might as well be magic. And I went, is that your cover?
That's the cover, yeah. Well, they weren't going to take the time to show us the fight, so they have to give us a visual cue that something is scary here, and they might have a fight, so let's have like sparkly, glowy energy.
I know. Well, I'm just watching a Star Trek with people with sparkly, glowy hands at the ends. I just was like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I mean, the question of what was the theme of the season...
It all did feel very rushed and cramped and crammed into the... Which I didn't expect it to be that way, but it still wound up getting there.
Mm. Well, the question of what was the theme of the season, for me, is I feel like the theme of the season was we're going to see how many different ways we can play with Star Trek and try to make it work. I don't feel like there was any solid... unless it's couples, like you said, because I mean that was very much in there. But we get a little bit of strange new worlds and new life forms and new civilizations, all that kind of stuff that's in the monologue. We get a little bit of it here and there, and then we get some references to the original series and some tie-ins, and some of them were good and some of them didn't really work. Like some of them feel like they're just there, like, hey, look, we know something. This is what I see going all the way back to the start of Discovery to now. Among the writers, I have this feeling that there are some people who they really know Star Trek. And then there are some people who don't know Star Trek and they go to Memory Alpha and they look stuff up and then they put it in their scripts because, hey, look, I made a reference to so-and-so.
Yeah.
And you feel like a tug of war of that. And I think you feel that through this season as well, where I thought the Trelane was pretty well done because it felt like Trelane. The Q reference I felt like was just thrown in there because Q is popular. And hey, maybe the Q might have had something to do with this, but they didn't. And the Metron thing was like, okay, well, that's our hook to Arena to try to give us one last excuse for the Gorn. So, yeah, I don't know. This is a lot of things like that.
Well, since this time, Akiva Goldsman said that somebody said, well, are you going to do some more Gorn for 4 and 5? And of course, 4 is done. Mm-hmm. And they're writing 5 now, shooting it quickly. But 4 is done and wrapped. And it's like, no, we're done with the Gorn. It's like, well, I have this scratch I want to itch and do whatever I want to do and fulfill dramatic purposes and choices and then pull it back to Arena so nobody can yell at me for messing up canon. And I'm like, okay. So now I'm hoping against hope that they do that with the timeline. They blew up. And I know it's problematic, and Greg Cox did his novel where the eugenics war was a secret war.
Sure. Yeah.
But it happened, and I know we're bumping. Although I will say World War III did not start in 2026 or whatever. The typo in the screen that was a last-minute addition that you weren't even supposed to be able to see in the Mirror Darkly, in Enterprise. We know when First Contact was. World War III was roughly in the decade before that. You don't have a 30-year nuclear war unless I have to stretch my headcanon to the fact that it was just conventional for 25 years and only got nuclear in the last few. Okay, maybe, but there was definitely a nuclear war. They talk about it Next Gen increasingly, and the nuclear winter on Earth and all of that. And then you get the supposedly the ravages of time left Zephram and Cochrane and Lily where they were to Scrabble again, unless I like thank you for that save. I'm going to say that was a ship sitting around that was a leftover, and they did that the way Cochrane reused his Titan II missile. Mm-hmm. But I'm waiting for them to resettle this timeline they've blown up, and maybe not even coordinated between the Project Con folder from Picard at the end, right, with the tomorrow alternate dimension. It's like, okay, so this is an alternate future, so we don't have to go by it. So Khan doesn't have to be a teenager in the 2020s. What? Please tell. I just want to why don't take I remember that Klingon fan looking at Mary Chifo and Ken Mitchell before the beginning of Discovery even aired, but after the Klingon confab blew up. And he said, please don't take my fandom away from me. And that's the way I am with this. Is like, please don't, like, I became a fan to sketch all this out because I thought it was amazing that they had this universe and this.
Yeah.
And don't blow this up and walk away and go, ha, 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 ha. It's like, leave us with the thing in place. Or somebody down the line might get the keys and fix it, which wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah. I think they're kind of like borderline at this point with this series of having changed things to the point where it will be very difficult to reconcile it with the timeline.
Well, we just need a few more Metrons to show up or some Q-Trelanes or whatever. If they can, they have a big reunion back on Vadia 9 and then
the Vadia 9 reunion. Yeah.
Vadia 9 reunion. Yeah.
On Saddle Up. So I take Goldsman and Myers for the word when they say that this is still the prime timeline, as we call it, because I'm okay with some flexibility, obviously, in writing stuff over the span of 6 decades. Stuff's going to have to change here and there. But Matthew has been convinced for quite a while now that this is all an alternate timeline. And it does feel that way a lot.
Yeah.
And for him, it allows the show to work well. So then he can focus on the stories and he's not worried about how it all lines up with everything else. So,
to me, that's why I watch Star Trek, is because it's this big. That's what got me in the beginning as I watched. Yes, the actors had charisma and the stories were imaginative, but what really made me go out and start buying books, what made me hang around, can I say it, maybe now 50 years later, is the fact that they were creating this. And before we had fancy names for everything, good and bad, before all this before pop culture was such a thing, the world building and the universe that they were making, I was just like, it just took me over. I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And here's the gaps, and here's the tech manual, and here's the gaps in the tech manual, and here's what these writers are like, oh, it's only 80 episodes. We'll never see any more, probably. So we'll just fill it all in. Oh, really? Okay, you're going to make a movie? Okay, well, this movie has almost nothing to do with the original series.
Yeah, right.
So we still can sit on what we're doing. And, but there are things. Look, eventually we're going to get to 2161 and there'll be no Vulcans arriving. And it'll be, oh, damn, now what do we do?
Yeah. They came in 2261. Yeah.
But at the same time, if we can avoid a World War III, I don't mind breaking canon. So,
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that. So
that's the double. That's the.
But
way.
yeah, like you say, for me too, the thing that was so attractive to Star Trek was that it's a world that feels real, right? It doesn't feel like it's a fantasy. It doesn't feel like it's made up. It feels like there's an effort to extrapolate on science, but to at least use real science as the basis of it, and also to make sure that events line up in a reasonable way so it feels like it's a real world. So when you do stray from that, obviously many fans start to feel like it's not like you don't have any creative freedom, but it is like, try to hold it all together to a reasonable extent.
Well, it's amazing. Yes, you can do a 2-hour movie and enrapture people with the world and the universe you've created. But now are you going to do a series of 8 or 10 of those movies and be as good at it after 8 or 10, 20 or 16, 20, 24 hours? Are you going to do a series where you have a pilot and a first season that catches everybody, 26 episodes or even 10? And then you come back for the second season and the third season and you do it, you repeat that, rinse and repeat, and you're still doing it after the initial wow factor has passed. And that's the challenge. But what you mentioned there at the end, it's like, well, that's why I'm a fan. Why? But the idea that other people everybody has their favorite, and I'm not trying to gatekeep here, but it's funny. Like when you react to something the way you do, and you're vaguely aware that you're not alone, once you've made that leap, then maybe the second leap is you just kind of assume everybody enjoys it for the same reason you do. And then part of the power of Star Trek lasting 60 years is, and Marshak and Culberth wrote about it in Star Trek Lives way back in the 70s. Like, why is this so popular? It's like, well, we can think of 8 or 10 or 12 different layers of why it's popular. Like the characters, the morality, the universe, the science, and the continuity. All of that stuff mixed it in, but everybody leans into one of those, one or the other. And the idea that, oh, well, not everybody is a fan for the same reasons I was one of the second or third things I had to learn way back. So,
which would be a good lesson for people to learn about not only Star Trek, but kind of life in 2025. Right?
oh, Chris, you extrapolator of Star Trek to all I need to know about life I learned from Star Trek yet again. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's our take on season 3 of Strange New Worlds. So before we go, Larry, tell everyone what you've got going on right now. Where to go to find all your stuff.
I've worked myself into such a lather that I've got all the lumps out of the cushion here out of your sofa, for starters. But no, everything is still at LarryNemecek.com. We have the Trek Files. We're in our 14th season of the Trek Files from Roddenberry weekly on Tuesdays. And I still do my live stream, Trekland Tuesdays live at 1 Pacific and 4 Eastern. And, Cadet Alice, we're trying to wrap up. But I do Second Opinion, which is my reaction show that I've started doing the last few years when there's fresh Trek. But it's all at my YouTube. I wish everybody would go like and subscribe on my YouTube because I got started on that late. But I still do Trekland Treks, the day tours, and Portal 47 for the backstage fans. And for the first time in 10 years, Terrace Cassidy and I are bringing back the big Geek Nation tour for the 60th. I don't know how much of a cave you've been in, Chris, but next year is the 60th anniversary.
I thought we were on 50.
And I was in a cave to the point where I didn't think anybody would care. I thought, the 50 is a 50, like 25th and 50th, and then 75th will be the next big one. And people are so excited or desperate or new with Star Trek and the world today that everybody's excited about the 60th. So, okay, fine. So we're celebrating, we're bringing that back, and geeknationtours.com. You can go there and see.
Well, that's great, because I remember years.
Tour of Star Trek. Yeah,
that's great, because I remember years and years ago, you and I on this show, he used to come on, and we used to talk about the tours every year beforehand.
Yes. Yeah. You did news. So everybody, we tried to do this, but between the pandemic and just uncertainty about the conventions and people's travel patterns and fandom patterns, now things have settled down to the point where it's worth being the week before the Vegas convention. You don't have to go to the con. You don't have to go to STLV, but that's why we start here. We'll end up in Vegas and have a day tour out to the Valley of Fire if people want to go. But we've got a couple of new sites here in LA, but for all the world that didn't do it we only did it in 2012, 14, and 16. And the 2016 was huge with the 50th. So we're also being cognizant of people's budgets. But also this time around, we have more celebrities involved. So Tim Russ is going to tell us, everything is a real location site. Thank you, Voyager Future Tense, for a lot of this. But Armin and Tim Russ and Sirach and Bobby Clark, and we have a couple more we'll announce after the first of the year. But if this is all new to you, I urge everybody to go check out Geek Nation Tour. Terrace has other tours for other things too, but the Star Trek locations tour, the LA to Vegas, is coming back. So we do need 11 people. We're getting on the road to having a minimum of 11, but it'll cut off at 18 and at maximum 23. So it's not a big, it's not a group. It's not a big group.
I just hope you don't encounter any Vesda out there in the Valley of Fire. So
that or a couple of loose Metrons with their.
I can just see them up on the hill.
They're little Greek, yeah. They're little Greek togas.
All right. That's all sounds great. Well, and if you want to find me, you can find me here elsewhere on the network. I mentioned a few times in the show today, Matthew Rushing and I do a number of shows together. Saddle Up is the show that's about Strange New Worlds.
Chris, you need to say that. You need to say Saddle Up. You can't
we actually have like a horse whinny sound effect that we used to put in the closing of other shows for that.
Used to.
Well, and the opening and closing of that show has horses galloping and making noises and stuff.
Oh, okay. Wait, what's the name of this again now?
Saddle Up. Because when we started the show, we didn't know what Strange New Worlds was going to be about at all. So we played off of Pike and his horse. So there you go. But anyway, Saddle Up, you can hear kind of in-depth discussions of every one of these season 3 episodes over there. Matthew and I also were going through Deep Space Nine. We started when the 30th anniversary kicked off, so we're doing a rewatch of that on the Orb. We're doing the same thing for Voyager on To the Journey. And we're doing a 20th anniversary rewatch of Enterprise on Warp 5. So we're all into the rewatches right now. So you can go check out all those shows if you want to hear more of my voice and thoughts.
Wow, it's cool to hear all those titles again. I'm glad you're keeping the catalog fresh. It kills me how long ago, like, you had me on as a guest at the beginning, and
2011.
I debated doing my own. I thought, no, I'll do some. I need to do something different than the pack of 5 or 10 people. Now it's 50 or 100 people. But I'll do when we can do cameras. I'll do an on-camera show, which now everybody just does YouTube and Zoom boxes. But
yeah, well, you got to get that holographic show going. Then you'll be on the cutting edge again.
Yeah, the Pink Ray 5K or whatever it's gonna. Yeah. Oh my goodness! Right. No, it's been far too long, Chris. This has been not the length of this episode. I mean the time since we recorded. Well, Chris, it's time to stick an engineering LERPA in it because the ready room is done.